No kidding. Okay, dependent origination is the topic, I guess. I'm going to slightly repeat myself. Is the topic. Pratitya samutpada literally means the way of how things come into origination. So dependent origination is basically the law of cause and effect, of karma, of how things come to be and how things cease to be. The Buddha simply put, this is because that is. This is not because that is not. This comes to be because that comes to be. This ceases to be because that ceases to be, right? And that simple explanation of dependent origination sounds easy enough, but it's actually one of the most complicated topics in Buddhism, aside from emptiness, which is another whole thing. But within dependent origination, as we spoke about it last week, we have a lot of other subtopics that come out of dependent origination. First one is the Four Noble Truths, right? In life there is suffering, the cause of suffering, the way out of suffering, and the path. And so we know that life is suffering, or in life there's suffering, right? Because we're not always happy all the time. And the cause of that suffering is because of dependent origination, because of the 12 links that hold us into this cycle of birth and death, constant birth and death. And that there's a way out. How's there a way out? By breaking the chain of dependent origination. And to break that chain, we practice the Eightfold Path. Right view, right speech, action, intention, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Right? This is the path that we need to walk in order to cut the chain. So typically, it's called the 12 links of dependent origination, right? And we typically would see it visually in a circle because everything connects to the other links, right? We have ignorance because of causes volition. Volition causes consciousness. Consciousness causes name and form, etc., 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 right? And the cycle is repeated over and over. So every time, all our lives and everyday life, right? Dependent origination isn't just about physical form. This is also about feelings, sensations, ideas. Any phenomena is part of dependent origination. And so as we study and get to learn the links, we're able to see clearly what arises, during our life, how things come to be, why they came to be, and why we go through the emotions and waves of life. And from that, the kind of conclusion of dependent origination is the 3 Dharma seals, or the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, non-self, and suffering, or nirvana, depending on the tradition. But impermanence is a very important topic also. There's a lot of important topics in Buddhism, but impermanence is one of them. Impermanence will essentially define all our suffering, really, when it comes down to it, right? Non-self, by discovering or by recognizing or realizing non-self, which is another big topic, we're able to, this is the first step into breaking this chain, right? Why is there self, non-self? Self in Buddhism just means that the egotistical side of things that we go through the motions, right? The I's and me's and my's and wants and needs, etc., etc. So by identifying that and seeing the truth in that, we're able to break this cycle. And so I'll try to explain slightly. I was going to go spend the next few classes going into detail into each of these links, but I decided against it because that's just going to take too much time. So I'm going to briefly go through it again. So the first link, so there's really there's no, even though sometimes we'll see these numbered when we read them in books or listen to Dharma talks, that they're numbered 1 through 12, but honestly there's no numbering system. There's no first, right? Ignorance is typically first, but number 1 could start any of these links, right? Because essentially they all connect together anyway. But for sake of ease and understanding, we always start with ignorance as first, because ignorance is what is the main cause of our rebirth in the first place, right? So ignorance here, when we typically view the word ignorance, we typically may think of it as stupidity or idiocy, right? But in Buddhism, it is the essence of not knowing or not seeing things as they are. Which, because of that, explains everything else. But what do we mean by not seeing things as they are? It is adding our subjective views to things, right? Because when we go down the list, right, volition or mental formations, we kind of have to skip a couple here, but we go to name and form, or mind and body, right? The physical and the mental aspects of things. I think last time I mentioned that there's a physical and mental aspect to everything, right? Like when we're breathing is the physical aspect of our body. Knowing that we're breathing is the mental aspect. Walking is the physical aspect. Knowing that we're walking is the physical aspect. And because of that, that goes into our senses, right? Our six senses: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, tongue, ears, and mind, right? And so we know that something smells good. We know that something sounds good. We know that something tastes good, right? And so when we come into contact with them, knowing that this tastes good, knowing that this sounds good, knowing that this smells good, we create feelings, right? And there's, of course, a plethora of feelings in the world. There's no way we can write down every single little feeling, but generally speaking, there's feelings come into positive, negative, or neutral, right? And by those feelings, then we create craving or desire. So of course, we always want things we like or enjoy, right? The pleasurable things we want more of, the unpleasurable things we want less of. And so there's always this motion of pushing away what we don't want and pulling in what we do want, right? There's that constant push and pull. And our desire can turn into clinging or attachment, right? Because we have an attachment to things we enjoy, things that we like, the people that we like, right? Automatically, when we walk into a room at a house or in the office or at work or at school, there are going to be people that we enjoy seeing and we want to socialize with them and talk to them and get to know them, etc. But there's also people that we don't like necessarily, and so we're trying to avoid them or ignore them, whatever it may be. Then we come into becoming. Becoming is basically putting all this together. Becoming is the action of what we do, right? And so, let's say you're sitting down and you have a craving for cake. You're like, cake sounds so good right now. I can taste it in my mouth. My mouth is watering because I'm thinking of cake. And so the becoming is you getting up and going to get cake, right? So it's putting all these together into the doing. And of course, we have the natural things in life as aging, death, and birth, right? And then because of birth and because of our ignorance, we're constantly reborn. So the cycle is continuously turned and recycled until we're able to escape it. If we are able to practice correctly, if we're able to diligently apply our practices into our daily life, we can stop and break the chain at feelings, right? At contact and feelings. Because at the six senses and at contact, we can still feel pain and pleasure, but we don't apply any feelings to it, right? It's not good or bad or neutral. It is what it is. That's seeing things as they are. So things that you would typically say, oh, I like that, right? I like the statue, for instance, right? We're adding subjectivity to that statement. I like the statue versus the statue looks good, right? Because when you're adding subjectivity to your views and your perceptions and your ideas, then you're creating potential craving and clinging. You're creating a desire and attachment by saying, I like this or I don't like that. So if we're able to stop at that point and view things as they are without adding any of our desires or attachments to them, then we would be able to break that cycle. Of course, it's not always that simple. It's easy to say, oh yeah, just don't say I like this or I don't like that. But go ahead and try that. See how easy that is. It's not that easy. What makes it easy is when we meditate on it and we come to the realization that saying I like this or I don't like that has no benefit to you, honestly, in the long run, right? Because if you say, oh, I like cake, and you go get cake and you eat the cake, now the cake is gone. That momentary happiness that cake brought you is gone now, right? It's not lasting happiness. And so if you're able to recognize that and that happiness that the cake brought you is impermanent, right? And we're able to apply that same rationale to everything else in life, then we're able to slowly escape the cycle, escape the bonds of desire and attachment. And last week I gave a quote from the Bahia Sutra. Bahia was one of the Buddhist disciples who was one of the quickest disciples to attain enlightenment. And he attained enlightenment after the Buddha gave him the short teaching, which he said, "In what is seen, there will be only what is seen. In what is heard, there will be only what is heard. In what is sensed, there will be only what is sensed. What is thought, there will only be what is thought." Think about that. What is seen will be what is seen, what is heard, what is sensed, and what is thought will only be what is seen, heard, sensed, and thought. In that statement alone, we're able to recognize that the Buddha is telling us to see things as they are. Not, I like this flower. Simply that this is a flower. This is a bell. This is a statue. This is whatever it is, right? So as we add subjectivity to things, then we're adding our perceptions and ideas and expectations, right? Expectation is one of the most dangerous things in our life, because we have expectations for people, we have expectations for things, for places, for ideas, right? And when those expectations are not met, then who suffers? You or the person you expected things from? You. Right? If you come to the temple expecting to become enlightened after one session and you don't, then is that my fault or your fault? It's your fault for having wrong expectation, for having wrong ideas of what is going to happen here. I hope that one day you would come here and become enlightened, right? That's my goal for you. But releasing expectations will release any potential suffering you may have, right? Because we have expectation for everything. We have expectation that people will drive correctly, right? That people will be civil, that will respect the laws of the land. And when they don't, and someone cuts us off, what happens? We get pissed off, we get angry. We want to drive in front of them and cut them off too. We're going to curse them out, we're going to flip them off. What happens? What could happen? What good does that bring? That brings no good. Because if you allow that anger to take over, that ego to take over, because that's what it is at this point, it's ego telling you, how dare you let that person cut you off and get away with it, basically is what's happening here, right? And so ego is trying to defend itself and say, no, let's cut in front of them, let's speed up and go in front of them and cut them off too. Teach them their own lesson, or let them taste their own medicine, whatever the quote is, I don't know. And if you do that, there's a potential of bad things happening. You could cause an accident, right? You can hurt yourself, you can hurt others, you can potentially kill someone at that point. All because your mind's like, how dare they do this to me? What good is that? And so by meditating on how things come to be, why things come to be, right? If you've heard me discuss my why meditation, this is exactly it, dependent origination. My why meditation is simply taking a feeling that you have or an emotion that is arising that kind of bothers you or whatever, and you're asking yourself, why? Why am I feeling like this? Because of this. Well, why do you feel like that? Because of whomever. Why is that person allowing you to feel this way, right? And you're continually asking yourself, why, until you get to the core reason of why you feel a certain way. And from there, now that you have the core reason of why you feel a certain way, or because of someone, now you have something tangible to work with. Now you have something that you're able to hold on to and have some sort of control over, potentially, right? Sometimes it's a person that is causing you suffering or whatever, and now you have to recognize or admit to yourself that you may have to distance yourself from them. Maybe you have to let go of them from your life, right? It could be whatever reason it is. Only you would know what that reason is. But that's essentially how we are able to get over our mentalities of escaping the bonds of life and death, right? Because that's essentially our goal, is to escape samsara, right? Which is the cycle of birth and death. So it's about see, this is why I wanted to go through all of them in detail, because I'm trying to surmise the whole thing. Before I continue, because I'm going to go a little bit more in detail. Before I continue, questions about this? Except you. I'm kidding, unless this is a simple question.
So the six senses, they ultimately lead to mental formations, and then mental formations give you an idea of consciousness. But those mental formations are based in ignorance, so therefore the ignorance leads to suffering. So then the rest of them follow after.
It's not a list of what happens first and what happens continuously, right? They're all interconnected. So they all work together and to create itself. So this is why I didn't number them, because if I number them, that's going to give you an idea of this is the sequence that needs to happen. But that's not the case, because any of this can happen at any point in time. Anything can happen together or separate of each other, but they're all related. That's why I didn't number them or put them in a circle. Well, I should put them in a circle, because usually I'll put them in a circle and like put little lines all between them so you know they're all interconnected. But this is the list I put them in. This is how I contemplate on them. This is in my mind, this is the order of causation, according to me. I may be wrong, maybe right, I don't know, but this is how I meditate on it. Yes, sir.
The way I like to think about it is, think of a soccer ball. And the hexagon, pentagon, and the point somewhere. And if you had, where do you start? Where's the beginning of that? And so, you take a point, so in reality, we're all interconnected, we're all forming this ball, this cube.
You can't take one piece out of that whole ball.
You take one piece out, there, that wall. And so, ignorance is just like your master tip on put his finger on. This is where I want to start.
Right.
And so that happens to be the one, but in reality, the ball has no beginning.
It's also, I think, my first discussion on dependent origination. quoted the Avatamsaka Sutra, which has the example of the net of Indra. Yes, so the net of Indra, this is from the sutra. There's a net of 3 dimensions, vast and wide, stretching in all 4 directions throughout the universe. At each point that a string meets another point of the net, there is a jewel, and this jewel reflects in all of the other jewels of the entire net. And further, that reflection too in all of the facets of all the other jewels. No single part of the net can be independent of the rest. A single movement of the net in one place will affect in some way the most distant part of the net or universe. The all is reflected in the one, and the one is reflected in the all. It's the same thing with the soccer ball example. There's no beginning, there's no end, as we chant in the Heart Sutra. What time is it? Okay, I don't have as much time as I thought. Yes, sir.
As far as the subjectivity is concerned, you were saying, that is a flower versus I like this flower. What about putting adjectives on it? That's a cool flower. I like it. It's a cool gold statue. Is that clean-ness as well, or does that have to just be flat out, I like dirt, this is that, this is this?
If there's an opposite, then it's still subjectivity. This is a cool bowl. This is not a cool bowl. So it's subjectivity. I like this bowl. I don't like this bowl. Subjectivity. Versus, this is a bowl.
So just be bland.
Right, basically. Yes, sir.
In that case, when we realize that we're expressing a value on that, but just say, oh, I just put a value on that that it doesn't actually have. I mean, we can't stop us from that. That's a beautiful flower.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think also of the example of the Eastern versus Western person, that someone in the West says, that's a beautiful flower, and they reach out and pluck because they want to take it home and put it in the vase. Because it's beautiful, and they want to look at it for a long time, as opposed to someone who appreciates it in its environment and knows all the things that went into it and appreciates that, but doesn't want it to stay there, knows it's not going to stay there.
Right.
So I guess maybe what he's asking is we can appreciate things without necessarily feeling them.
Right. Because appreciation is another way of saying, seeing it as it is. Right? You know that it's a flower. You know it's a beautiful flower, but you're not holding on to the idea of the beauty of the flower, if that makes sense. Because part of the 3 seals goes also to the 3 doors of liberation, which discuss emptiness, single signlessness, and come on, student of mine. Emptiness, signlessness, and aimlessness. So emptiness is what we see when we should apply the power of emptiness when we get caught into things. If you catch yourself, oh, I like this flower, or I think this flower is beautiful, then that should bring up the recognition of, but what is this flower? Or why do I like this flower, right? Because emptiness is basically saying that this flower doesn't even really exist. This flower is empty, right? Because what creates this flower? And I've said this example many times. What makes this flower? What caused this flower to come to me? It's a real question.
Everything that makes up you kind of makes up the flower.
all the elements that went into this, right? So the sun, the soil, water, all these non-flower elements created this flower, right? And so if we take out any one of those elements that made this flower would no longer exist. Hence why we would call it empty. Same thing for this table. This table exists because someone made it, there was a carpenter involved, there was machinery involved, there was tools involved, right? And there was assembly involved. But if we take out any of those aspects, this table no longer exists. And even those aspects have conditions, right? The carpenter needed parents. Their parents needed their parents. They needed food, they needed water, they needed survivability, right? The tools also needed other elements to create themselves. So the list goes on and on and on, right? And so when we look at things, or when we discuss emptiness, part of why emptiness is important is to recognize that we shouldn't be attached to things, because if they're empty and they don't exist, then why do we attach to it? Why do we attach to things that are beautiful? Why do we attach to people? Attachment to people, attachment to things is a sort of it's a type of addiction, right? Because if you're attached to someone, then you're constantly wanting to be with them. You constantly are anxious to see them, to spend time with them, right? And when they're not there, then we feel anxiety, or we feel whatever other symptoms come up, right? But if we're able to apply the power of mindfulness and kind of go through the steps of why we feel that way, then hopefully you should come to the realization or come to the conclusion of why you feel that way, right? It will be different for everybody, but essentially it comes down to ignorance and not knowing things as they are or should be. Okay, maybe I will dedicate one more session on this, because I do want to go through the list individually. I think it's important. Does that kind of make sense for the most part? Last week I did a better job, so I encourage everyone to go to last week's discussion.
The question arises, how much of it is a knowing, how much of it is an experience?
How much is what?
How much of it is a knowing and how much of it is an experience? You can know and basically kind of make everything go into emptiness, and then also see emptiness within inside yourself, but having an experience of that instead of a knowing, because if you don't have the experience of it, you can know it, but it isn't going to have any scientific.
Right. Well, that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? We can have the knowledge of how this works. We can have the knowledge of how anything works in life, but without the direct experience of wisdom, then we can't penetrate it deeply. So that's why we practice meditation alongside our studies, right? Because you have to contemplate on the practices and on the teachings in order to penetrate it deeply. Because you can superficially understand and say, yes, this makes sense. I know how this works. I know the process. This is how this becomes. This is how that becomes. Blah blah blah. But if it's not something that you take with you through everything that you do, then you're not really applying it, right? Because it's one thing to say, yes, I know how to meditate, I know how to be mindful. But if you forget all about that the moment you exit the door, what was the point of that? Mindfulness meditation isn't just about sitting on the cushion. Meditation is not just about sitting, it's not just about walking, right? You have to take the meditation practice off the cushion and apply it to everything else that you do. Meditation is activity you can do in any waking moment of your life. You don't have to be sitting down for meditation. You don't have to do a walking meditation. Meditation isn't that. If that's what you think meditation is, then you've been wrong. So if you're able to exit the temple, walk to your car in mindfulness, and observe your surroundings in mindfulness, do things in mindfulness, driving in mindfulness, cooking in mindfulness, studying in mindfulness, cleaning in mindfulness, then you're applying the practice into life, and you're able to, realizations won't come automatically like that, right? They won't, just because you're being mindful 24/7 doesn't mean you're gonna have a realization. Because you can do things habitually, automatically, because it's a routine that you do, right? When we wake up in the morning, we get ready for work or for school and eat breakfast, right? It's a whole routine. You can probably do that with your eyes closed because you know exactly what to do, where to go, right? So you're not getting any, you can, at the end of the day, you'll be like, when did I even wake up? I don't even remember waking up. I don't even remember putting my clothes on because it's a habit, right? You just do it. So that's the same way with our practice. If you just do it out of habit, out of sheer because-ofness, then you're not benefiting from the practice. So you have to, it's not just about applying it, but it's also about contemplating why you're applying it. Does that make sense? Yes, Alex?
Would you be willing to share an example of how your insights on the stuff that you work change something the way you do a certain thing?
This has helped me let go of expectations. I always emphasize leaving expectations out of the door, to kill your expectations. I don't encourage killing, but I encourage killing your expectations. So my biggest realization off of this teaching was letting go of expectation. And that honestly has made me so much more at peace in life. With the small exception of this building being built. But that was my biggest takeaway of how, of all the teachings that I've studied and practiced and contemplated and meditated on, this has been the biggest one where I've had the most aha moments. This is probably one of my favorite topics. Because again, it's the topic, but it's a very detailed topic, right? I have an entire whole notebook about this. This is my dumbed down version of it, because I was reading my original, I'm like, this is too complicated to teach. But one, it'll help you release expectations. That's the biggest takeaway. Two, it helps you recognize impermanence in things, right? Because we have a lifestyle of wants and needs, right? We have a lifestyle of wanting things that make you happy, that bring you pleasure, and you have a desire to push away things that you don't want, right? There's aversion there, right? There's desire and aversion. So it helps you recognize the impermanence of things. And it helps you see how things come to be, right? Because sometimes we think, oh, just this place just randomly happened. Or think of you being here, for example. What caused you to come to the temple? What caused you to have the desire to come to the temple, the desire to learn Buddhism or to practice meditation? You think that came out of nowhere? That all of a sudden you woke up one day and be like, I'm going to go to the temple. No. There were causes and conditions that caused that to come to be. And there were causes and conditions that allowed you to come to be here now. Right? If this temple were never to exist, nobody would be here. If our teacher never became a monk, we would not be here. This temple would not be here. I would not be here. So those are causes and conditions. So this helps you see that everything is a cause and everything is a condition. And even the causes have conditions and the conditions have their own causes too. Right? It's an endless cycle of cause and condition, of karma, whatever you want to call it. And so that way, by recognizing that, then it helps you not be so disappointed in things and people and your expectations, right? This goes back to expectations. Because you know the causes of things. You know how things come to be. Everything that comes to be has to cease, right? Nothing can last forever. Things can last for a very long time, but they cannot last forever, right? And so the sooner we're able to recognize that, the sooner we're able to accept that impermanence and things are the natural course of life of the universe, then it'll be easier to accept when they disappear, or when they break, or when they go away, or when they die, right? And then death is my last realization of this. The fear of death. People always fear death. And for the longest time, I didn't understand why. Why fear death? We fear death because we don't know what happens after death. That's it. We fear death because we don't know what happens. We do all the things we do in life. We take care of our bodies, or at least try to, right? We diet, we exercise, we attempt to make our bodies a temple, to live longer and longer, to stop death from happening. We cannot stop death from happening. You may be able to prolong life, but death will always come. Has to come. When there is birth in anything, even ideas, concepts, perceptions, there's always the death of it as well. And so now I'm like, okay, death, come for me. I'm ready. Let's do this. Not that I want to die yet. My life mission is not complete. But if death were to come knocking on my door, I would at least offer it a cup of tea first. So there's a lot of aha moments you can get from this if you meditate on it. And one way to meditate on it is to kind of go in a certain order of things. I made this list in how things typically come to be in a certain order. So you may see the order slightly different depending on where you read, but for the most part, this is how things naturally arise within our phenomena of the world. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now. Any other last minute questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? I'm sorry?
Can you explain what mindfulness is?
What? Mindfulness. Oh gosh.
The practice was because you were saying that you don't have to sit down and meditate, you can walk and you don't have to, so just keep going and work that.
Mindfulness is the practice of awareness. Mindfulness is simply acknowledging what is there or here, and what arises, what ceases, what happens. Oh God. Yes.
About the driving across town, that's one thing I think most people catch. I mean, how many times have you driven in your car across town and suddenly realize you don't even remember the trip, you don't remember the traffic, the stoplights, or not much of it, right? So you were not being mindful as opposed to you drove across town and you were paying attention and you saw the other cars and the things around you. And it's not all one way or all the other, but I think mindfulness is an increasing feeling that you're right here in the present moment where everything is happening.
Mindfulness can be awareness too. You can be mindful of your day-to-day. You can be mindful of your surroundings, but without awareness of the mindfulness, then it becomes, that goes along with mindfulness. Is the awareness of being mindful.
If we go with ignorance at the top there, when we look at it as ignoring reality, then mindfulness is the opposite of that. So mindfulness is the remedy, the medicine for ignorance, for ignoring reality.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, so mindfulness, the awareness of seeing what's there, right? So we go down the list, again, mindfulness is just, this is a flower, or I see a flower, or I see a tree, or you see, you know, bugs as you walk, right? And so mindfulness is your awareness of seeing things as they are, for what they are, without adding any subjective emotion or ideas or perceptions to it, right? It's just seeing things as they are, being mindful of what you do, what you think, and what you say, right? Because all our speech and all our actions arise from where? Our mind, right? And so if we're aware and we recognize and be mindful of how our mind works, then we're much more in control of what we say and what we do, right? Because if you're not mindful of how you're thinking, then you have the potential of saying something badly or negatively, right? And so, and if you can't stop yourself from saying something bad, then you have the potential of doing something bad, right? Because your mindfulness is not there. We all know how powerful words can be, right? Words can change the world. Words can either destroy or create wholesomeness or wholesome actions and ideas. So if you're aware of how your thought process, right? Because Buddhism ultimately is a mind-centered religion. Buddhism, to me, is very much more of a psychology than anything else, right? We have rules and rituals and practices, right? Just these are supportive practices just to help you be present and be mindful. But ultimately, it's the practice of how your mind works and how to purify that mind. Because if you can purify your mind, then you never have to worry about saying anything bad or doing anything bad. At that point, you become a good enough person to hopefully become enlightened. But because we're habitual creatures, we often react before we think, right? And because of that, we often say things out of the heat of the moment when we're arguing with people or when we're angry, right? And once you say something out loud to someone, there's no way of taking that back. You can apologize all you want, but that scar is there, right, from your words. And so, but if you practice mindfulness and you become mindful as the argument's happening, and you actually take a look at what your mind is going through, how you're feeling, why you're feeling, then you have the power to control what happens next, right? I always joke this and say that everyone thinks they're the master of their own mind. But you're absolutely not the master of your own mind, right? Because if you were the master of your mind, then you would be able to stop your thinking completely. You would be able to control what you do, say, and think all the time, right? But we can't do that because we're not the master of our mind. But by practicing mindfulness and being mindful of how that thought process works, then we can slowly start to become an apprentice of our mind and then work our way up to master, right? It's obviously much easier said than done, but that's why we practice meditation. Because in meditation is where you are observing your mind. You are dissecting how your mind works, why your mind works a certain way, why you feel certain ways, where those emotions come from, how did they arise, why did they arise, right? You're getting to know yourself, basically. And a lot of times, we'll discover some terrible things about ourselves that we either know, but hold in, right, and ignore and say, no, that's not me. It really is you, but you're just, putting it underneath the rug, under the rug. And I think that's one of people's biggest fears is them recognizing or seeing things that may potentially cause them to be terrible people, right? Because nobody's perfect. We all have good and we all have bad, but our job now is to create more goodness and to stop any badness from happening. Make sense? Yeah, mindfulness is a whole thing. I literally wrote a book about it, so I can give you a book. It's a big topic. It's a big topic. Okay, any other short questions? I'm way over time. All right, if there's no, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to talk a little bit with your mindfulness in the daily basis, you know? Because your mind is everywhere. So when you start doing something, for example, eating, you just focus on the flavor of the food, the color of the food, how you cook it. And if your mind goes away, just bring it back and try to enjoy the food by yourself. No phones, no music, no nothing. And then you start doing those things with everything you do. Cleaning, reading, meditating. You know, if you're asleep, you sleep, you know. Just be there in the right moment. So you're breathing helps to keep you here. That's only one.
Because have you ever been in a situation where like, oh my God, where did time go? Because you were not mindful of what you were doing. Because your body was here, but your mind was out there. So if you're able to practice mindfulness and keep your mind with your body, then you're able to enjoy even the mundane things you do, eating, cooking, cleaning, right? We think of those as tasks and chores that are just, nobody wants to do. But if you actually be with the activity, then you have the ability to enjoy it as much as we dislike doing some chores, right? But there's beauty in doing, or there's a beauty in the ability to do those things if we're able to direct correct energy toward it. There's, at least for monks and nuns, we have 52 gathas, they're like mini mantras for the different tasks that we do. So everything we do, there's a little mantra to help us remember to be mindful. So when we wake up, there's a mantra. When we put on our robe, there's a mantra. When we brush our teeth, there's a mantra. When we're cleaning, when we're cooking, when we're doing any activity, lighting incense, bowing or changing out the fruits of the flowers, there's a mantra. Why? To help you be mindful of the one activity that you're doing at a time. Right? Because you can be doing something and talking to someone or listening to music and your mind's drifting off, right? Because if you're cooking and you're talking or listening to music or you're distracted, you have the potential of burning your food, right? Who wants to eat burnt food? Nobody wants to eat burnt food. Do you want to eat burnt food? I don't want to eat burnt food. So if you're able to be mindful in that one task, then you can potentially make the best dish you've ever made in your life. Maybe. Okay, we will transfer there and go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. We'll just do general chanting today. body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness. I send my heart along with the sound of the. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen, listen, this wonderful sound brings me back to my true home. In gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our careful efforts to mindfulness and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness. Lies our true home. The incense in the censer now is burning all the Dharma realm. Auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilled. As all Buddhas now show their perfect body, homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattva. Homage to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma hensagely sung throughout the Dharma realm. Empty space and 3 periods of time. Homage to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya, honored future Buddha, Manjushri, great wisdom Bodhisattva, universal great conduct Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattvas, and the glorious mountain assembly of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. Homage to Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate Avalokiteshvara, great compassion Bodhisattva, great strength Bodhisattva, earth store, great vow Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure seed Bodhisattva. Namo great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Ratnatrayaya. Namo Aryavalokiteshavaraya. Bodhisattvaya. Mahasattvaya. Mahakarunikaya. Om Sarvaravaye. Sudanadasya. Namoskritva Himamarya. Varokiteshvara. Namo Narakindi Rimahavatsvami. Sarvarhato Shobham Ajiyam Sarvasattva. Namo Vastava. Namo Bhagamami Tato Taryata. Om Avaloke Lokate Karate Hiri Mahabodhisattva. Sarva Sarva Mahamara Mahimahiridayam. Koro Koro Karmam Doro Doro Vishati. Mahavishati. Dara Dara Dirinishvaraya. Chara Chara Mama Vimara. Muktadehi Shina Shina Arsham Prashari. Vishwa Vishram Prashaya. Horo Horo Mara. Horo Horo Hri Sara Sara. Soro Soro Bodhya Bodhya Bodhaya Bodhaya Maitreya Narakindi Drishanina Bayamana. Swaha Siddhaya Swaha Mahasiddhaya. Swaha Siddhayoge Shvaraya. Swaha Narakindi. Swaha Mara Nara. Swaha Sira Simha Mukaya. Swaha Sarva Mahasiddhaya. Swaha Chakra Siddhaya. Swaha Padmakasaya. Swaha Narakindi Vagalaya. Swaha Mavari Sankaraya. Swaha Namo Ratnatrayaya. Namo Arya Mantrapadaya Swaha. The Dharma body is bringing morning light and concentration. My heart is at peace. A half smile is born on my lips. This is a new day and I vow to fast. Has risen, shining in every direction. Noble Sangha, diligently bring your mind into meditation. Namo Shakyamuni The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Moni Buddha Namo Shakya Moni Buddha Namo Shakya Moni Buddha. The one who bows and the one who is bowed to are both by nature empty. Therefore the communication between them is inexpressibly pure. Our practice center is the net of Indra, reflecting all Buddhas everywhere, as my own purse reflects in all Buddhas, to whom with my whole life I go for refuge. Offering light in the 10 directions, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, to whom we bow in gratitude. Teaching and living the way of awareness in the very midst of suffering and confusion. Shakyamuni Buddha, the awakened one, to whom we bow in gratitude. Cutting through ignorance, awakening our hearts and our minds, Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of great understanding, to whom we bow in gratitude. Working mindfully, working joyfully for the sake of all beings, Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of great action, to whom we bow gratitude. Responding to suffering, serving beings in countless ways, Avadokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of great compassion, to whom we bow in gratitude. Seed of awakening and loving kindness in children, sprouts and all beings, Maitreya, the Buddha to be, to whom we bow in gratitude. Showing the way fearlessly and compassionately, the stream of all our ancestral teachers, to whom we bow in gratitude. The Dharma is deep and lovely. We now have a chance to see it and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep course of Prajna Paramita, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-being. Listen, Shariputra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than. The same is true with feelings, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor dished, neither defiled nor immaculate. consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no object of mind, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no will be, no cause of ill being, no end of ill being, and no path, no understanding, no attain, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattva's ground in Prajnaparamita find no obstacles for their minds, having no obstacles they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambuddhi. Therefore one should know that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequaled mantra, the destroyer of ill being, the incorruptible mantra. Prajnaparamita should therefore be gate gate para gate para samgate bodhi swaha gate gate para gate para samgate bodhi swaha gate gate para gate para samgate bodhi swaha. We invoke your name, Avalokiteshvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffer in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying, and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening deep, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering in the other person. We invoke your name, Manjushri. We aspire to learn your way, which is to be still and to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will, without judging or reacting, we will look deeply so that we will be able to understand the roots of suffering through the impermanent nature of all that is. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding to cut through bonds of suffering, thus freeing ourselves and other species. We invoke your name, Samantha we aspire to practice your vow, to act with the eyes, heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning, and to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to others. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may be an inexhaustible source of peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species. We invoke your name, Shiti Garba. We aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and so we can bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those places. We are determined not to forget about or abandon those in desperate situations. We will do our best to establish contact with those who can find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, and human rights are not being heard. We know hell can be found in many places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute to create more hells on earth, and to help transform the hells that already exist. We will practice in order to realize the qualities of perseverance and stability, so that like the earth we can always be supportive and faithful to those in need. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Dwelling in the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the dwelling in the refuge of Dharma. I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Taking refuge in the Buddha, help all people recognize their awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities to embrace all beings and support their transformation. Reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the path. Namo Buddhaya. Quick reminder for everyone to mark their calendars for August 7. We are celebrating Ulambana, or Parents' Day, our second most important holiday of the year. So that'll be August 7, that'll be Sunday at 10 a.m. Thank you.
One more